Hello, David Newman, and welcome to the podcast. How are you, my friend?
Thank you, Avish. It's great to be here. I am excited, dare I say, tingly. I am tingly to be here.
Well, I don't want to know too much about that, but I'm glad that being on the podcast makes you tingly. Thanks for being here. I have a ton of stuff I want to talk to you about and ask you about. But to kick it off, for people who are listening, that tiny percentage of people listening who are not familiar with the brilliance of David Newman, could you just give us the sort of 1 minute overview of who you are, what you do?
Yes. And first of all, Avish, I got to tell you, I am shocked that most people don't know. But for that small majority, no, I'm kidding. No one knows who I am. I'm a very minor league celebrity in a gigantic pond. So, my name is David Newman. I run a firm called Do It Marketing, and we work with CEOs, founders, and executives to build their market eminence. And we can talk more about what that is
Mhm.
through the combined power of speaking, publishing, and podcasting. The goal of that is to make you a micro celebrity and a micro authority in front of people who matter the most. So if you want more success with prospects, all kinds of stakeholders, investors, partners, the media, top talent, raise your market cap and just be a bigger fish in the pond that you're in. Those three strategies over the last 20 years, I have found are the three big needle movers: the speaking, the publishing, and the
Mhm.
podcasting.
Well, I want to dig into those three a bit, if for no other reason that I can use this podcast as a way of getting free consulting for myself.
Totally.
Of course, that's why we do the podcast, is to get the advice I need. Um, Before I get into the nuts and bolts a little bit of those three things, who is this for? Who is going to most benefit from developing marketing eminence?
Sure. So I spent a good number of years working with professional speakers, professional consultants, professional business coaches, corporate trainers, people like that, and taking everything from that playbook of how to build authority, how to build celebrity, niche celebrity, how to raise the profile of your personal brand. We now work with mid-market CEOs. So think about Inc. 5,000
Mm-hmm.
companies. They're probably already doing some of this, some of the time, somewhat okay. So they might be writing articles or their team is doing social posting, and I consider that publishing. They may even have in the back of their mind the idea that someday they'd like to publish a book, and that's fine. We work with folks to help them there too. They may be speaking at industry events, on panels. I also consider, obviously virtual speaking. So
Sure.
Zoom calls, webinars. You might be doing this on behalf of your company, product demos, putting kind of a webinar marketing strategy out there as an education-based marketing for your company or for your firm. And then, of course, they may be doing some of this some of the time somewhat well, but it's not getting results. So when they get up in front of an audience of prospects, perhaps, maybe no one comes up after them and says, "Oh my gosh, we have to talk. Tell me more about what your company does. We got to bring you in. We need to get a demo. We need to buy your technology." Maybe when they're on a podcast like this and they get crickets.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they socialize the podcast, they share the podcast. They tell all their partners, they tell all their employees, "Hey, the boss was just on a podcast." What they say and how they say it on that podcast, it's just not that different. It's not that exciting. It's not that compelling. It doesn't drive people to think differently or act differently about the topic at hand. And then finally, publishing, and you and I know this being in the expert community for 20 plus years, people that write books, 95% of those books are crap.
Mm-hmm.
95%, especially now in the age of AI.
Oh
Oh
God.
my gosh, well, AI can write my book in 7 minutes. Like, well, sure, but I got two questions for you. Number one, is that book going to be great? Number two, is that book going to be you? The answer is no, that book is not going to be great. And no, that book is not going to be you because it doesn't contain your personality, your point of view, your attitude, your war stories, your battle scars, your personal biases, experiences, recommendations, your manifesto, if you will, of the way that you see the world and the way that you would like others to see the world to benefit them as a reader of that book. So it's going to be a generic, plain vanilla, same-o, lame-o kind of book. So
Mhm.
those are kind of the mistakes that people make with speaking and publishing and podcasting, where they say, well, that hasn't moved the needle in my business. That hasn't helped bring me any more prospects, leads, clients, or sales. It's because you're not doing those things the right way. And you're also not connecting those three areas where the speaking drives the publishing and the podcasting drives the speaking and the publishing, and so all three legs of that triangle need to be integrated into a self-reinforcing system.
Okay, so the problem here is that you just dropped like seven things I want to follow up on. So you have too many little information
Take
bombs.
notes, people. Take notes if you're
Take notes,
listening
yeah. And
here.
hey, it's a podcast. You can always rewind and listen to it again.
That's
I know
true.
you did say a lot of things, a lot of bells. And it's funny, I'm not a mid market CEO, but I'm just ticking off in my head how many of those things I can relate to in terms of like, oh, yeah, I've been on podcasts, nothing. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, word of mouth and people seeing me speak is the number one way I get business, but I've never quite tied it together with the like flood of leads. It's like I got a lot of interest and publishing. Like I got two books, I got good comments on it, but has that led to inbound leads? Like not really. So I'm like all those bells are going off.
Yeah.
Before I tap your brain for free consulting, uh, you said mid-market CEOs. It's a great tight niche. Obviously, they can benefit a lot, and those are people who are going to be potentially invited to speak and want to start maybe shifting and building a thought leadership type platform. I got a wide range of people who follow me. I never really had a tight niche. So there's probably people listening to this who are solopreneurs. There's people who are like managers, kind of your for lack of better terms, employees, like
Sure.
not C-level, but just doing good work out there. Is marketing eminence something that can help those people or any people, or is it really you got to be like kind of a CEO level to really be taking advantage of this?
Great, great question. So the answer is any executive who wants to move up, right? They either want to move up in the organization that they're in, or they want career portability, where they want to move, they want to change companies or even change industries possibly, but they want to take their personal brand with them. So when we talk about building this personal brand that drives the company brand, that is a 100% portable asset. So let's say you're a brand manager at Kraft Heinz, and you've been there for a number of years, and you got passed over for a promotion, and you're like, well, wait a second. I speak at these food industry events. I'm always talking on these podcasts. I'm always, asked to write articles and contribute to the professional journals and the trade publications in my industry. This company's not treating me right. I'm just using Kraft Heinz as an
Sure.
example. Lawyers, attorneys, please leave me alone. It's just an example. I love ketchup. I love Heinz 57. I love barbecue sauce. It's not about you, it's about me. So that person wants to move. That person wants to move, hopefully, maybe to a more senior role or higher salary, higher status, higher prestige. They're going to look at their resume. Yes. They're going to look at their qualifications and skills. Yes. But resume, qualifications, and skills, that is table stakes.
Yeah.
That's the cost of entry. Today, when you're looking at the kind of democratized and popularized media landscape, where everyone can have a YouTube channel, everyone can have a LinkedIn profile, everyone can have some presence as a podcast guest. They're going to look at what else does this person bring to the table? What other brand equity? What other, like you said, thought leadership?
Mhm.
What other assets, tangible and intangible, will this person bring to the company, bring to the department, and bring to their specific role that other candidates can't, won't, or are simply not qualified to do? So this is really the difference maker. In fact, it's funny. I had another conversation with another friend of mine, and they said, "David, this is level 11." I said, "Level 11? Like, is that a Spinal Tap reference?"
Mhm.
Turns out it was not a Spinal Tap
Oh,
reference. He says, "No, no. When you look at the Google HR document, what it takes to rise to the level of level 11 is like the highest
Sure, yeah.
executive level at Google. There's a specific entry in that HR document that talks about your personal brand as a Google executive.
Interesting.
Those that have it are qualified and considered to be promoted to a level 11 position. Those who do not have it will never make the cut. You will never be in that top echelon of executives at Google unless you have a personal brand defined as who knows you, what's your digital footprint, are you invited to speak,
Basically
are you
defined as
considered an
marketing eminence, right?
authority?
It's like marketing eminence, defined as marketing eminence.
It's
Like that's
market
exactly
eminence.
what
That's
you're
right.
talking.
Are you standing head and shoulders above your peers who have similar qualifications, experience, and skills? What's the secret sauce that you bring to the table?
Yeah, and I see
And
two
for
kind
folks
of
that work for Google, it is your personal brand. It's required to get to level 11 in the corporate structure.
yeah, and I see kind of two sort of benefits to this, even if you're not like a CEO. Obviously, if a CEO can really help you boost your business and all that. But even if you're not, number one, to the resume thing, it also kind of is push versus pull, right? Like active out resumes is like, let me send my resume to all these places, internally or externally. But when you develop this like marketing eminence, then people start finding you because you're speaking or you're on a podcast and or you present at a conference or you publish. And they're like, oh, let's learn more about David. He's published this really interesting stuff. So it
Yes.
creates more of, in addition to working together, because they see your resume, then they find it, but they could potentially find it without. And it's also like personal brand is interesting in this world now. Like you said, where everyone can have a YouTube channel and influencer, but it's like planning for the future. You may be like, oh, well, I'm just a middle manager at such and such a place. But if you start doing this now, because it takes time, I'm assuming it takes, this is not like a 3 month, let me do this, and then boom, boom, I'm promoted. And you could tell me I'm wrong, but you start laying this groundwork now, then in 2 or 3 or 4 years, when you start to feel stagnant or like I'm not getting the opportunities here, if you've already put this into place, now suddenly you're in a much better position than if you just were like, I don't need that. Basically, digging your well before you're thirsty, to quote, Harvey McKay.
Absolutely right. So this is career insurance. This is even CEOs. Your CEOs are not the CEO of their company forever. So they're
True.
looking at what's my next move? Am I going to become the CEO of a bigger company? Am I going to be acquired? Am I going to have an exit event where someone's going to come in and give me tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for the company that I've built? That decision also is based on market eminence and what is that CEO's personal brand that the company is acquiring or investing in. So yes, it's absolute. This is a long-term play. It is 100% career portability for the rest of your professional life, not just the role that you're in as an executive, as a CEO, as a mid-level manager. This you are building an asset that will pay dividends years and decades into the future if you keep working on it.
Yeah, and as someone who finds this very frustrating, as someone who sort of was raised on the idea of the meritocracy, um, the more we progress in a social media connected world, I feel like it is. I mean, you've been in the situation I have, I'm sure, where you go to a conference and the person who got the gig you wanted is not nearly as good as you are. Not
Right.
throwing any shade at anyone specific. Um, but it's just they had a bigger platform or they had a better connection. And I'm kind of getting in the fiction world, right? I mentioned you have finished a draft and I'm hoping to publish in the next year or two. And so much of it now, so getting a publishing deal isn't like, I mean, yes, the quality of if you've got an amazing manuscript, but a lot of it is like, oh, here's my book. By the way, I got 100,000 TikTok followers. Publisher's
Right.
like, oh, yeah, I don't care if your book is trash. You got 100,000 people. And it's so, I mean, it's a little bit different. We're not talking about being an influencer, but it's similar in that people equate eminence, following, publishing with credibility, whether it actually relates or not.
Yes.
And if you
Yes,
do
yes,
both, if you're
yes.
actually good and have that marketing eminence, then suddenly you're really firing on all cylinders.
Well, the big trend, you put your finger on something that is a topic near and dear to my heart, which is the sad fate of the invisible expert. So,
Mm-hmm.
people that are doing great work in isolation, sometimes people come to me, they say, David, the problem is we do amazing work. Our clients love us. We have testimonials and references out the wazoo. To the market at large, we are a best kept secret. And I'm tired of being a best kept secret. And then who's winning those gigs? Who's winning those stages that you're talking about? It's the loud and mediocre. It's the
Yes.
loud and mediocre. So if they're broadcasting 10 times louder than you, doesn't matter how good you are, they're going to get noticed and you're going to be overlooked. And so, is there a meritocracy? Well, you and I were raised by parents who believed there was a meritocracy. They
Mhm.
were wrong. Sorry, mom and
Well, they might have
dad.
been right back then, but the
Yeah,
world
that's true.
changed.
Right. In the 60s and 70s, sure. Maybe there was a meritocracy. Now it's who's going to tell the best story in the marketplace,
Hmm.
who is going to be more persistent and consistent, who is going to keep showing up. And what you mentioned about, oh my gosh, I see this person everywhere. You want that level of omnipresence where you are the first person that they think of because they've heard you on a podcast, they've read your articles, they've bought a copy of your book, they consistently see you on stages and webinars and podcasts, and you become a micro authority or a micro celebrity. So think about those two terms, right? An authority is somebody that we recognize and respect. A celebrity is someone who has some level of fame or reputation that they're recognized on the street, they're recognized
Hmm.
in the grocery store. All you have to do is put the word business in front of both of those words, and that's the impact that we're after. For you to become a business authority or a business celebrity, that's going to stand you in good stead for the rest of your professional career.
Well, it's funny as we're talking about this, and I mentioned that not everyone listening is a CEO. Um, but one of the biggest authorities in business these days is Seth Godin. Great writer. I love his stuff. But thinking about what you're talking about, he often tells his story of like one of his origin stories is when he was like a manager at a software company, educational software company. He just like started an internal newsletter,
Mhm.
and would just send it out every week. Here's what my team is up to, and through that he developed this like name and this reputation and started rising through the ranks. And again, it's just exactly what you're talking about. It's just you're not publishing like out in the world or like just even internal, like just getting your name out there in ways with credibility and authority just can go a long way regardless of your situation.
Yes, 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 and yes.
All right. Well, you touched upon this best kept secret thing, which before we get into some of the nuts and bolts, which we're probably gonna run out of time for because there's so many other interesting things to talk about. This is something I watched some of your material. This is something you talk about as the obscurity gap. There's
Yes.
like four levels to it. So, and the best kept secret is the first. So, if you don't mind, could you share what the obscurity gap is and kind of what the goal is of the going through those four steps?
Sure, absolutely. And it's also color coded. This pyramid that you're talking about is color coded. So there are people that are in the red zone, the yellow zone, the light green, and then the very top of the pyramid is dark green. At the base of the pyramid, which is where most people are, most executives, most founders, most mid-level managers, most corporate employees, they are a best kept secret. So they're doing work in a vacuum. They're doing work in relative obscurity, maybe not inside the four walls of their company, but certainly out in the marketplace. No one knows how awesome and amazing and innovative and creative and powerful their ideas or their technology or their products or services are. And it's really hard to get noticed. It's really hard to get traction. It's really hard to get buy-in. So if you're in the corporate world, you mentioned Seth's story about working at Spinnaker Software, I think was the
Yeah, that sounds
educational
right.
software company. People would start to listen to him. He would earn a seat at the proverbial table because he started to elevate and become more of that visible
Hmm.
expert. So that's level two. Level two is in the yellow zone where you do make your expertise visible. Now, the problem with that is a lot of visible experts look the same, sound the same, say the same things.
Hmm.
So they've commoditized their expertise, the thinking being, if everyone's a thought leader, then, well, really, no one's a thought
Yep.
leader. And so people are assuming that title and taking it, and then they're just posting commoditized information. So here's how to information is dead. If you're sharing internally, externally, in your speeches, in your podcasts, in your social media posting, if you're sharing how-to information, ChatGPT, all the AI tools can do bigger, better, faster, smarter how-to information than you will ever be able to do. You're going to lose that game 100% of the time. In order to move from the yellow zone into the light green zone, where you're really looked at as an authority, you need to change the kind of content that you're speaking, podcasting, and publishing about. No more how to, because how to is dead. Stick a fork in it. It is now how to think, what to believe, and how to get ready for what's coming next. So, how to think is about perspective, opinion, your lens on the world, that manifesto type of thinking. Um, don't just tell people the how to, tell them how to think about the problem, how to think about their situation, how to think about solutions. So that is a much higher order kind of content. The second one is what to believe. So you need to be a myth buster. You need to stick it to all those self-soothing delusions, partial answers, incomplete information, all of the things that have led people astray. The easy answers, the quick fixes, all of that nonsense. You need to be the democratizer and the popularizer that is going to battle against the easy answers. And so the third level is how to come to the table prepared for what's coming next. So, what are the trends? What are the positive forces? What are the negative forces? How do we think about seeing around corners? Where is this leading us? Who stands to win? Who stands to lose if certain things come to pass? Whether that is in your product category, in your service category, market, regulatory, compliance, political changes. We're taking over countries left and right, Avish. We're taking over Greenland and Gaza and Canada, and we're going to soon take over Australia. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Australians, but the Americans are coming for you. How is that level of disruption and change and rapid rewriting of the rules? How can you share? How do we get ready for what comes next? So those are the people in the light green zone. At the very top of the pyramid is what I call the market mavericks. And the market mavericks borrow from the playbook of the authority and the celebrity. They democratize and popularize this new way of thinking, thinking about shifting beliefs, and also how to prepare for what's coming next. And they are continually speaking about it, getting on interviews. They're maybe either guesting on a podcast or hosting on a podcast. They are publishing books and blogs and articles and social media posts on a consistent basis. They have a Substack newsletter. They have subscribers. They have followers. They have fans. They have built a movement around their intellectual property, and they're the ones that are getting quoted in the media. They're the ones that people are lining up around the block to work for or buy from or invest with or acquire. And it's those market mavericks that have gone up this four-layer
Mhm.
enchilada. We all start as the best kept secret. Then we go to visible expert. We have to decommoditize that to become the authority. And then from the authority to be the real rock star at the top of the pyramid, the market mavericks, who are truly considered business authorities and business celebrities. And that's the pyramid that you're talking about.
That's great. It's fun. It's timely for me because I've been thinking a lot about my content and going back. I've been writing various articles, blog posts, whatever, for 20 plus years. And I think when I started, it was the how-to content is kind of what was drilled in. Like, just put out a lot of content on how to do things. And number one, as you said, I mean, even before AI, it was already being overblown by the internet because doing TEDx talks and YouTube, like any answer, any question you could find. So the how-to content wasn't great anyways, and now AI is blowing it out of the water. Um, and when I started paying attention to the newsletters that I get, the email newsletters I get that I read, it's funny. because it's not the how-to content for the most part.
Yeah.
The how-to content I'll go out and find when I really want it. The stuff that hits my inbox that I read, it is the how to think. And ironically, because one of the hard things about content is what do I write? What do I publish? It's almost the exact same message every email. Just maybe a slightly different story it's wrapped in, but it's not like I got to come up with how do you say yes and? How do you build a better team? How do you lead more effectively? How do you say it to yourself? How do you deal with change? How do you deal with software? No. It's like it's every message is almost exactly the same. And it's that repetition, but you would think it turns people off. But as a consumer, it's the one I read. The ones I read are the ones that are basically saying the same things over and over again. Now, is that something you found in working with your clients in terms of the messaging, in terms of not necessarily just throwing the same stuff over and over, but is it just like one kind of message you just find different ways of saying over and over again? Or is it more like, oh, you got to kind of say a lot of different things that all kind of fit under this one umbrella?
I don't think so. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. In other words, it's not literally one thing
Sure.
over and over and over again, but it's also not every topic under the sun. So, I mean, obviously, this depends on your goals as well. So, if you look at Seth Godin, let's because Seth is a great example of this. Seth, you can't. Seth has written millions of words, millions and millions of words, like 50 books and blogs and all kinds of coffee table books, all kinds of crazy nonsense. You'd be hard pressed to find a single how-to article ever
Yeah.
from Seth Godin. It's not like, oh, here's how to do this step one, step two, step three, step four, right? 5 tips on so and so. It is always reframing, rethinking, different lens, different perspective. Now, his topics, because he's primarily a business thinker, marketing thinker, right? Uh, he's not going to talk about dairy farming unless there's a lesson in dairy farming for businesses. So
Right.
his range is very, very wide. What I have found is with CEOs, founders, mid-market executives, corporate managers, they want to pretty much stick to the domain area of whatever product, service, business, or industry their company is in. So let's say that you're a founder of an accounting firm, right? You are not going to start talking about, you know, pig farming or
Sure.
other
Yeah.
kinds of things. It's always going to center around what to think. I'm sorry, how to think, what to believe, and how to prepare for what's coming next, with something to do with accounting, finance, corporate finance, regulatory, compliance, personal finance, money, saving, investing. So we could probably make a mind map of like 25 things that a CPA firm could start to publish
Mm-hmm.
content on regularly. Similarly, if you're a management consulting firm, if you're a widget manufacturer, if you make fire hydrants in Peoria, right? Fire prevention, that's your domain, and there's going to be 15, 20, 25 different topics. So will it be literally all over the map like Seth Godin? No. Will it be, single topic, single issue, reiterated over and over again? Not literally, but I think what you're saying is because I think the most interesting people to follow are the ones where the tone, the voice, the attitude, and the point of view is consistent. And then they apply that to a narrow spectrum of topics that are of great importance to their readers or of great interest to their readers.
And I
So
think the key is
is the voice and the tone consistent? Yes. The content is probably going to be this narrow band of relevant topics.
yeah, and I think the key there, at least I can say think internally, is the shift from how to how to think.
Yes.
Because how to think, it's that's really more like first principles, right? It's not like with how to's, you can really get into 30, 40, 50 different tactics. But with how to think, you're talking about one, two, three mindset shifts, right?
Yes.
So you may talk about a lot of areas, but they're all going to sort of feel like they're talking about the same thing because at the end of the day, if you're doing how to think or what's coming, or busting myths, like it's just going to be a few central ideas that then get propagated in different ways.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to shift gears. I know I wanted to get into the free consulting, but um, I want to kind of dig deeper on this thing and get a little bit meta and to make it a little selfish. Because as you know, the whole point of this, right? My podcast is called Yes and with Avish Parashar. It's about saying yes and instead of yes but. And what you just talked about there, your point of view, your authenticity, what you want to talk about, I want to get into that because I talk about something in some of my keynotes and my writing and workshops about saying yes and to yourself. Because I think what happens is we get so wrapped up in what I should do. It's like here's what I really passionate about, or where I think I could go. Yeah, but I don't know if that's going to work. And I feel to a degree that one of the first steps in this process is identifying, well, what is it that your expertise in, and not just like your expertise. Obviously, here's my resume, but like what I really want to talk about. What's my point of view that's different? And to me, that's kind of versus saying yes and to yourself. So is there a part of your process where you help people figure that out, or do they generally come to you kind of fully cooked, knowing, all right, here's what I want to do, I just need help doing it?
No one, when people first, that's such a great question. No one has any freaking idea. No one has any idea how what they have to offer is any different, any better, cooler, faster, smarter. We totally have to dig into that. We totally have to excavate that. Now, almost always it's there, but we can't recognize it in ourselves, right? This is why the coaching and consulting and advising business is so important. You don't need necessarily a brilliant consultant to help you with these things. You simply need someone who's not you, someone who
Yeah.
is not in your head, who is not 2 inches away from the wall looking at their thought leadership or their ideas or what they have to offer the world. Someone who can look at it from the outside, start to draw this out of you with questions and prompts, and what's right with the world and what's wrong with the world, and where do most people make easily avoidable mistakes, and what have you seen that just breaks your heart out there in the marketplace, and how have people shot themselves in the foot when it comes to this topic. So this is funny, you can unlock these things. It almost is like a yes and
Mm-hmm.
exercise. So you might remember that Dale Carnegie, who first came to fame back in the 1930s and 40s with a public speaking class,
Mm-hmm.
he would get fairly introverted people together and say, "Hey, stand up and talk for 2 minutes." It was like pulling teeth. They did not want to talk. And then he realized, well, how do I get these people to talk? And one of his first prompts that got people to open up immediately: "Tell me about one of your pet peeves." "Oh, Avish, let me tell you what really bothers me." And they would just off to the races. So he realized that it's the topic that gets people talking. So when we talk about what's right with the world, what's wrong with the world, where have you seen mistakes, what are some easily avoidable errors and disasters, what do you think about this topic over here, over there? The prompts and the questions that evoke stories and that evoke emotion. That's where people start to tap into the really good stuff. And so that's where you can also start to differentiate your ideas, differentiate your positioning, your messaging, not just as a expert, but as the face and the voice of your brand. So, you become known as someone who is contrarian or different, or is not afraid to share what's right with the world, what's wrong with the world, the point of view, the attitude, et cetera, et cetera. And that, in the age of AI, being more human is going to be your competitive advantage.
I I love that. I love that idea of starting with kind of what annoys you, the pet peeves, and this contrarian thinking. It always kind of triggers something in my mind because I talk a lot about what is your persistent yes but, like what's the idea that keep pops up, and every time it does, your mind's like yeah but, and to me it sounds like almost because I feel like there's some ideas you're going to come up with, and you're going to say yeah but I don't know if people are going to agree with that, or yeah but that's not what the common wisdom says. Like for example, um, I've never considered myself a very disciplined person. I've achieved a lot. People think, oh, I'm very motivated. I'm like, I'm not. I'm really lazy. Um, and I'm always afraid to talk about this because everything that's been beaten into me from the personal success industry is discipline and habits. And here's what you have to do. And if you're not, you're lazy. And a lot of speaker friends I know talk about it like this, like, oh, suck it up. I don't have time to get, I don't have, I only write when I get motivated. Luckily, motivation hits me at 9 a.m. every day. Or like my mortgage
Right.
can't be paid with motivation. Like I get it, I get all that. But there's always something that's operated differently. But every time I think about writing or talking about it, my mind's immediately like, oh yeah, but if these people see it, they're going to start attacking you, and that almost makes me feel like the stronger the yes but is, the more I should be leaning into it to do it because that may be my biggest point of differentiation.
1,000%. So one of the prompts when we sit down with our clients during, let's say, a think tank day where we kind of lay all of this out, whiteboard it, flip chart it, mind map it, brainstorm it. One of the prompts that gets almost always some sort of immediate burst of creative output. What do you say that other people cannot say, do not say, or are actually afraid to say? Because, oh, that's not done in our industry. That's no one ever says that. That's, taboo. That's forbidden. That goes against the playbook of success, motivation,
Mm-hmm.
discipline, all that stuff you're talking about. Then we dig even further and we say, okay, so let's talk about what's not done. What's not done in your industry? What would be frowned upon? What would piss your competitors off? What would piss your customers off? What would piss off the trade press? What would irritate people that, oh, God, I hate that guy? And so we don't necessarily use all of that verbatim. We never use all of that verbatim. But the idea is polarization is good.
Yeah.
Polarization is necessary. So if you don't risk turning some people off, you will never turn anybody on. And this
Yeah.
polarization is incredibly powerful because when, let's say, we dig deep into this with a specific client, they go, oh, but there's a whole bunch of people that would disagree with that, and we're going to get hate mail, and we're going to get. I said, okay, cool. Are those people that would really hate that idea and violently disagree and send in letters and emails and start, posting on your social media how crazy and wrong you are those people that you want or need on your side? They go, no, we hate those people. Those people are completely wrong. They look at our product, our service, our industry the complete wrong way. I said, okay, so you are afraid to turn off people who are never going to buy, never going to work here, never going to invest, never going to acquire your company, never going to give you media coverage. It's basically the enemy. You're pissing off the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then here's another flip, right? What's the definition of an enemy? Someone who believes all of these things differently than we do. So it's not like, oh, well, people are going to disagree with us. And so that makes them the enemy. The definition of an enemy is people who think completely differently and in
Mm-hmm.
your worldview think wrongly or at a very surface level around these critical issues that are so important to your best clients, right? So I said, okay, would your best client disagree with this? Would your best customer, would your biggest investor disagree with this? No, our biggest investor loves this idea. That's why they gave us $10 million. I said, okay, so as long as you're not pissing off people who love you and believe in you, who you're pissing off is people who already don't like you and already believe in a whole different worldview than what you contain. So honestly, what do you have to lose? Nothing. Nothing. So I piss off people who will never do business with me. You
Mm-hmm.
know, am I a polarizing character with my personality, with what I say, how I say it, how I think, how I recommend other people think, what to believe, how to get ready for what's coming next? There's a lot of Avish, this is gonna be a shocker to you. There's a lot of people who don't like me and
What?
who would never buy a book, would never sign up for coaching, would never engage with me in any way, shape, or form. Pissing them off brings me such amazing joy, such great satisfaction, because I only want to work with people who believe what I believe and who are going in the same direction that I want to take them.
And I think that is such a powerful lesson, but it's a hard one for people to embrace. Like, I'm a people pleaser. When I get that one email, I suddenly start rethinking my entire keynote, right? 100, 200,000 people in the audience. You get one person's like, I didn't see how this, like, literally, I did a keynote for 1,000 HR professionals, had a bunch of feedback. The client, I didn't do feedback forms, the client sent me their feedback forms. A bunch of people said, this is great, so relevant to HR. I had like one comment. I didn't see how this related to HR, and no one at my table did either. And I was devastated. This is like 8, 9 years ago. I was devastated. I'm like, oh, am I not good enough? Do I need like? It's just like, but I had all these other people in the comments talk about how relevant it was to HR professionals. Um, I don't know. Do you have any? This is like deep psychological issues, but you must encounter this with clients. Like they have a much stronger desire to avoid negative feedback than to even grow their business and hit their revenue goals and further their careers.
Absolutely right. So I call this the voice of judgment versus the voice of objective intelligence. And I've been literally teaching this for 20 years plus. I learned this in 2003 from one of my early mentors. Think of it, the voice of judgment. We all know what that sounds like. You're
Yeah,
not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're stupid. People
the
don't
yes but
like you.
voice.
There's an entire table of these. There's an entire table of SHRM people who now hate your guts. Yes, there's 295 other ones that love you, but these five people, God, they hate you. They
Uh-huh.
have your name on a dartboard. They are just throwing darts at your face. That's the voice of judgment. The voice of objective intelligence says, okay, let's put this in perspective. Number one, you are a seasoned speaker. You have thought about this material for the last 20 years. You've shared this with clients and audiences who have taken away tremendous value. Your feedback is 98.7% positive. Why in the world are you listening to that 1.3% of whiners, complainers, and unimaginative boobs? That's right, unimaginative boobs who don't agree with your worldview and don't see how it applies to HR. So the voice of judgment is that little red devil on your
Mm-hmm.
shoulder, and the voice of objective intelligence is little white angel on your shoulder. Our professional and personal happiness depends on dialing down the volume on the voice of judgment and dialing up the volume on the voice of objective intelligence. The voice of judgment, that little red devil, never going to go away, ever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how much money you make. I don't care how many promotions you get. I don't care how big your company or your bottom line is. Does Jeff Bezos have that little red devil whispering? Yes. Does Bill Gates? Does Oprah? Yes, they all do. The difference between them and us, they put that in perspective and they pay commensurate attention, which is very, very little. They pay commensurate attention to the little red devil, and they pay commensurate attention, which is 95%, on
Mm-hmm.
the voice of objective intelligence. That keeps them going, thinking bigger, doing bigger, being more ambitious, reaching for higher and higher goals. The voice is saying, you've never done that before. That's not going to work. That's impossible. That goes against the current trend. We don't have technology to take people to the moon, blah, 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 blah. Okay, or we do. The best iteration of this, Avish, I think, is Steve Jobs. And people that worked with Steve Jobs back when he was alive, they called it his reality distortion matrix.
Yeah.
He didn't care what people say. Oh, that's impossible. That's never going to work. We don't have the tech. The technology literally does not exist, Steve. He says, you'll figure it out. Bye. And he closed the door. The deadline did not change. The goal did not change. The technology requirements did not change. But the technology doesn't exist. Doesn't matter.
Figure
Here's
it
your
out.
iPhone. Here's your iPad. Here's your smartwatch. Here's your next iteration of the MacBook. And he didn't care. He literally did not care about the voice of
Mm-hmm.
judgment. So he is the mental model, as close as I know. I didn't know him personally, obviously, but his voice of objective intelligence was set at 100. His voice of judgment was set at 0. That's a superhuman capability. Most of us can't do that.
Well, it's so funny because listening to this and thinking back to what we were talking about earlier, I realized personally for me, in addition to kind of the habits and the conditioning, I think one of the reason I gravitate so much, even when I'm trying not to write how-to content, I think one of the reasons I write how-to content is because of the voice of judgment. Because if I write something about like how to think, my mind immediately goes to the objections the reader's going to have. So I got to make sure I address them. And then I got to make sure I give how to so no one has any questions. And then I end up with a 1,500 word article that no one reads that gives too much information instead of like a nice, concise 300 word how to think one, which is going to get people going, ooh, I want to learn more about this. And again, I think
Yes.
really is, it all comes together. It's that voice of judgment that's making me do it, not just like a tactic.
Yes. So let's go back to Seth Godin, who's really a great mental model for this. Seth will write a 300-word blog post, the first sentence of which, the conference industry is broken, period. I just came back from a conference. Here's what I experienced. Here's what they forgot about the way humans connect when they gather and should be collaborating. And it's a thought piece, right? And so the first sentence, imagine all the meeting planners, conference producers, trade and professional
Mhm.
association people. What do you mean the meetings industry is broken? The conference industry is broken. He just says, listen, go with me on this journey, right? I'm going to propose that the conference industry is broken. I just had this experience. I wish it had taken into account the way that humans connect, humans collaborate, humans communicate. It didn't. And there is room for massive, massive innovation in the way that trade and professional conferences are put together in the future. Is he going to give you a recipe? Going to give you 7 steps how to make conferences better? No. He's going to
Mhm.
say, think about what's broken, think about what could be and should be, and then he'll plant a couple of value bombs, a couple of kind of thought starters, right? He'll put a couple of handles on these ideas out there that say, what if we stopped having conferences and we started gathering and convening collaborations? What do you think would be different if we called it a conference versus a collaboration? Now, he's great at posing these questions and making us think. He doesn't
Yeah.
pre-digest the thinking and spoon feed you the answer. He's like, well, damn. And then can you imagine all the people going to their boss, going, boss, we're 6 months away from our next company conference. What if it was a company collaboration? It's like, well, what does that mean? Let me send you this 300-word Seth Godin article. Now
Yeah.
everyone's thinking along the same, what if the world were different? What if we approach this with fresh eyes and a whole new perspective? What does a company collaboration do that a company conference could never do? And they're off, and then people go, he's a genius. And other people go, that article was a total waste of time. It was a fluff piece. It didn't give me
Mhm.
any help in how to make my life or my conferences better. This guy is arrogant, and he obviously did not go to the right conference. Now, again, is Seth concerned about pissing off that reader? Probably not. He's probably jumping up and down happy about pissing off that reader. Is he excited that he started to change the boardroom conversation with that other person who read it and said, "Hey boss, we're 6 months away. What can we do to have a company collaboration instead of a company conference?"
Yeah. It's the
And
voice
that's the
of
payoff,
objective
is that
intelligence.
now people are talking about your ideas, sharing your ideas, and amplifying your ideas, not because it gave them the answers, but because it gave them the right questions.
But what's interesting about that too, and I don't think he does this intentionally, because I don't think he's a big social media guy, and I don't even think his blog has comments. But when you leave it open ended, then people who disagree will often comment because people on the internet these days cannot help but comment on something they disagree with.
Yes.
Now, what that does is it fuels engagement because the algorithms see, oh, people are engaging with this content. They don't care they're engaging, say, I hate this, this is stupid, you're wrong. But that spreads, and then more people who benefit from the message find it and comment. And then you got people arguing in the comments. But if you go too granular, again, either no one reads it because it's too long, or you've already laid out all the points, so someone reads it and is like, I disagree with this, so I'm going to move on. But if you leave it
Yes.
more how to think, you encourage by encouraging the disengagement, you actually increase the reach, which is hard to stomach but incredibly powerful.
Yes. And I have a really good hack for the negative comments. If you're getting negative comments on LinkedIn, Facebook, social media of any kind, like you said, the more negative comments, the better. First of all, other people who agree with you will come to your defense and they
Yeah.
will mix it up in the comments. But what I do, I always reply to even the most negative, hateful, ignorant comments, but I don't reply with words. I reply with a GIF. And it's usually a funny GIF. It's usually something that will disarm the person. It's even sometimes it's usually in agreement. Like, it's someone going, yup, you're right. Yup, uh-huh. And they don't know what to do with that because they're
Yeah.
expecting a fight. And it's like verbal judo that it's like, I'm going to use your own energy against you. And I'm going to put a funny meme. You might never see it, or you might see it and it makes you laugh and it disarms you. But all the other 50 people in this thread are going to see that I reply with humility and good humor to my haters. And so that drives even more engagement, right? And I've had comments that people go, "Oh yeah, sorry man, I was having a bad day. I didn't mean to be a dick." It's like, "Okay, cool." But I never engage in an argument. I acknowledge I either like it or I have a little, whatever, and then I drop a GIF that is funny and that is meant to be disarming or more of a, humility play. And so
Wow.
this is why, you get 50, 60, 70 comments. 35 of those or 40 of those are from me because I'm replying to
Post a
everybody
little
in the
GIF or
thread.
funny comment. Yeah, that's I love that. And I think that's just a great. It's again to tie it to my own content. It's a very yes and response, right? The general thing would be like, oh, this person's disagreeing. Yeah, but let me tell you we're wrong. It's like, yep, and here's a funny GIF. Like I'm just not going to disagree with you. I'm not going to engage with you. I'm just going to post something funny, disarm. And sometimes it's going to make people more mad. So what do? They comment back.
Yes,
This is the algorithm,
yes.
right? It's like it's
And then you give
great.
them a second GIF and a third GIF.
Yeah, and eventually they'll figure out like, all right, this person's just not going to respond. I love that, and I think that's a great sort of thing to end on. There's probably about 20 more things I want to talk about. So we'll do this again at some point, hopefully. I'm going to finish up with one final question in a minute. Before that, I talked about I wanted to go into the nuts and bolts of the speaking, publishing, podcasting. We didn't get to that, but I had watched some of your content, and I know you have some of this stuff out there where people can learn more. So that's one of the reasons I was okay not going in super deep here because I know you have resources, I believe, where people can learn and go deeper in this. So why don't you share number one if people want to work with you or just learn more about you? God, we talked about so much good stuff. I didn't even get into the fact that you have 3 books: one on marketing, one on speaking, one on selling, called Do It
Yep.
Marketing, Do It Speaking, Do It Selling, all of which are 3 of the best books I've read on those topics. So if people want your books, they want to learn more about you, or they want to get a deeper dive into these core elements of marketing eminence, what are some of the best ways to experience the David Newman show?
Thank you. Thank you for the kind comments on the 3 books. So we do have some free training. If people want to kind of dip their toe in, they pop over to doitmarketing.com/webinar. And that is our 37-minute executive briefing on demand. You can watch it anytime, 24/7, on how to build your market eminence and how to start thinking about the publishing, podcasting, and speaking kind of power triangle, if you will. And then we also have a free PDF, a free download called the Do It Marketing Manifesto. That's at doitmarketing.com/manifesto. And everything else is on the main website, doitmarketing.com. There's a blog, there's our podcast called The Selling Show. You'll find all kinds of goodies on there. But the 2 freebies that might be more relevant to our conversation today are the free training and the manifesto.
Excellent, and I will link to those in the show notes as well, so people can click on the links or just type it in however's best for you. Fantastic, David. Well, we're gonna wrap up here. I kind of like to end these with the same question for every guest. It's a very simple question. I do what I do because I have an honest belief that if everyone made the very small shift of switching their default from yes but to yes and, the world would be a better place. If everyone just started with yes and, I think the world would be a better place. So, what, in your experience, is one small thing that you feel if more people or if everyone did, the world would be a better place? Just a small shift that people made.
Asking for help. Asking for help and then being willing to accept the help. This is an area where if I could turn back the hands of time in my professional career, both as an employee and as an entrepreneur, I look at all the times I didn't say no, but I said no thanks. I
Mm-hmm.
said no thanks when people extended genuine help, genuine advice, genuine guidance, genuine feedback. I always felt that it was a sign of weakness, and I find out now that asking for help and accepting help along the way is actually a sign of strength and smarts. So my yes and is please, 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 when you're in trouble, when you're stuck, when you're about to make a decision, or you have a question that you need answered, ask smart friends for help and be willing to listen and be open to that help.
Wow, that is fantastic and feels like a message I should probably also take away for myself. All right, sir. This was fantastic. I took notes. I'm actually going to re-listen to this episode. This was great. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much, David.
Great to be here, my friend.